screen, please. Right, the live stream has started, so good morning to everybody. Before I start the business of the meeting, I will go to each committee member in turn to confirm that they can hear and be heard. It is a legal requirement for me to do so. If you can, please have your video on so that you can be seen by those in attendance and the public watching. Please advise me at once if at any time during the meeting you experience any technical difficulties that prevent you from hearing or being heard. I remind members of the committee that you will only be able to vote on an application before the committee if you have been present for the whole of the presentation of and discussion on the application. I will now call on each councillor's name in turn. Please speak to confirm that you're able to hear me, and I will confirm in response that I can hear you. Councillor Paul Andrews.
Good morning, Chair and all. I can hear and see you clearly. Thank you.
I can hear and see you. Councillor Polly Andrews.
Good morning, Chairman. Could I pass on a message from Councillor James? He's just rung me. He's having some difficulty in connecting, and will.
He is with us. I can see him. I can see him on the screen.
That's fine, and I can see and hear you, Chairman.
And I can see and hear you also. Councillor Bowen. I think he's going to rejoin us shortly. Councillor Fagan.
Good morning, I can see and hear you.
I can also see and hear you. Councillor Foxton.
Good morning, Chair. I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Good morning. I can see and hear you. Councillor James. You're muted.
Sorry, I can see and hear you clearly, Chair.
I can see and hear you also. Councillor Graham Jones.
I can see and hear you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning. I can see and hear you. Councillor Millmore.
Good morning, Chairman. I can see and hear you.
Good morning. I can also see and hear you. Councillor Milne.
Good morning, Chair. I can see and hear you perfectly.
I can see and hear you too. Councillor Roan.
Good morning. See and hear you, Chair.
Good morning. I can see and hear you. Councillor Selden.
Yes, good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I can see and hear you.
Morning. I can also see and hear you. Councillor Stone.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I can see and hear you.
Good morning. I can see and hear you. Councillor Swinglehurst.
Good morning. I can see and hear you.
Good morning. I can see and hear you. Councillor Wilding.
Morning, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear. Thank you.
Good morning. I can see and hear you. Councillor Bowen. Councillor Bowen.
I can see and hear you, and good morning to you again. I've been roll called twice now. That's very rather unusual. What a privilege.
Right. Good morning. I can see and hear you. Right. I'd now like to move to Mr. Bishop, who will introduce the officers that are handling the applications this morning.
Good morning, Chairman, members. My name is Kevin Bishop, Lead Development Manager for Planning Services. Today we have 4 items for your consideration. They will be item number 6, Land at Acton Mill Farm, Suckley, will be presented by Josh Bailey. Item number 7, the Riverside Flats, Ross-on-Wye, will be presented by Heather Carlisle. Item number 8, Land at Hillview Dindor, Gemma Webster. And item number 9, Land adjoining Duke Street, Withington, Alistair Wager. Chairman, also in attendance, we have the legal advisor to the committee today, Dawn Evans, and the Highways Manager, Mark Lewis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting today. The Council is video and audio streaming this meeting live on the Council's YouTube channel and making an official recording. Please remember what you say and do in this meeting has a global reach, and your words and actions should be chosen very carefully. Please ensure that all mobile devices are switched off to prevent interference with the audio and video system. Members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. So I go to item 1, apologies for absence. We've received 2 apologies this morning, Councillor Graham Andrews and Councillor Johnson. Have we any other apologies? No. Name substitutes. We have the following substitutes: Councillor Bowen, who is standing in for Councillor Graham Andrews, and Councillor Swinglehurst, who is substituting for Councillor Johnson. I now move to item 3, declarations of interest. Please indicate by raising your virtual hands if you wish to declare an interest, and I will call each councillor in turn. I will start the ball rolling. Item 9, I've got a non-pecuniary interest that I know the applicant for item 9. Have we any other declarations of interest? I see no hands raised. Right. Item 4, minutes, to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of February 2021. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Can I ask Democratic Services whether the electronic voting system is ready, and to confirm the number of eligible voting committee members for this poll?
Yes, Chairman, there are 15 voting members and they may vote now.
Okay, thank you. So the poll should be on the screen now. You can vote for, against, or abstain. Obviously, if you weren't present at the meeting, you just abstain.
Chair, all votes are in. We have 13 for to approve those minutes and we have 2 abstentions.
Okay, thank you. Item 5, Chairman's announcements. I've got no announcements as such. We will have a timer while members are speaking. Jen Priest will be dealing with that. So that will give a visual reminder to members and public speakers with regards to their 3 minutes speaking. Right, we move on to the business proper then. Item 6 on the agenda, application 201895, land at Acton Mill Farm, the Borough, Suckley. Which is an erection of a detached single-storey 3-bedroomed agricultural workers dwelling. We have one speaker, Mrs. Hooper, the applicant, who has made a video submission. No physical speakers present today. So the officer making the presentation is Josh Bailey. Ward member for this application is Councillor Chowns, who is not a member of this committee, but will have the opportunity to open and close the debate. So without further ado, if I could ask Mr. Bailey to make the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and a very good morning to everyone. Before beginning the presentation, members' attention is drawn to the publicised schedule of updates, in which, following the publication of the report, members were emailed directly by the applicant's agent to provide a background to the application, although officers note that this does not introduce any new material considerations. The application red line comprises a largely trapezium-shaped parcel of land located northeast of agricultural buildings. It forms part of a holding totaling approximately 21 acres with up to a further 100 acres rented alongside barns, stables and storage facilities. It is 1 mile east of the hamlet of Acton Green and 3 miles north of the nearest policy RA2 settlement, Cradley. The application before members, as the chairman has just confirmed, seeks planning permission for the erection of a single dwelling to be occupied by one of the applicants, who is the care farm manager. And as always, the application site is denoted by the red star on screen. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. The holding is registered and operates as a care farm, which was established in 2003. The holding has diversified beyond rearing animals, also providing education for a wide group of people from schools, care homes, and referrals from doctors who need extra non-medical intervention and support. The applicant currently resides in accommodation with their family within the 3-storey Grade 2 listed watermill, which is approximately 80 metres southeast of site. And this can be seen on the block plan above by the building, which is at the the southeast of the top image next to the public highway and the watercourse, but I'll cover that off further off in the presentation. The topography of site rises gradually heading further north, although considerable localized undulation characterizes the area. Field boundaries are a mixture of post and rail fencing, wire fencing and hedgerow, the latter of which fronts an unclassified public highway and which acts as a county border between Herefordshire and Worcestershire. Could I have the next slide, please? The location plan is edged in red and identifies the application site. And deposited with this application is a planning statement submitted in confidence. This appraises the extent of operations and accounts and why the application has been brought forward, as members will note, in order to provide bespoke accommodation for the applicant's son and grandson where applicable. In assessing this application, the development plan comprises the Herefordshire Core Strategy and the NPPF, the latter of which is a significant material consideration. The site also lies within Acton Beecham, although the parish is currently not considering advancing a neighbourhood development plan. Members will note the council is currently unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, engaging paragraph 11 of the NPPF, which promotes a presumption in favour of sustainable development, although recent public inquiries confirmed that the council's housing policies can still carry weight. Could I have the next slide, please? In which on screen now is the proposed block plan identifying the dwelling, and this will be a 3-bedroomed single-storey dwelling finished in brick walling under clay tiled roof and softwood windows and doors. And the next slide, please, which is the proposed site plan on screen, which is showing the entry to site to be taking off the existing track within Acton Mill. And the next slide, please, which would be the floor plan, identifying the internal layout of the property. And on screen, next slide, please, which is the proposed southwest and northwest elevations, in which officers consider that the proposal is of an acceptable design in line with policies SD1 and LD1 of the core strategy, which is consistent with section 12 of the NPPF. And the next slide, please, in which you'll see now the proposed northeast and southeast elevations, and that due to separation distances between the proposed dwelling and adjacent properties, impact upon residential amenity is minimal and would not lead to conflict with the requirements of policy SD1 of the core strategy, which strives to safeguard levels of residential amenity, and which is consistent with paragraphs 127 and 180 of the NPPF. And the next slide, please. In the office, In the officer's appraisal of this application, the site is in open countryside, where residential development is restricted to certain exceptions, engaging policy RA3 of the core strategy. One criterion is where a proposal meets an agricultural/forestry need or other farm diversification enterprise for a worker to live permanently at or near their place of work, which would need to comply with policy RA4. The policy states proposals for dwellings will be permitted where it can be demonstrated where there is a sustained essential functional need for the dwelling, where it forms part of essentially financially sustainable business, and where such need cannot be met in existing accommodation. And this approach aligns with paragraph 79 of the NPPF, although in referring to the Braintree Court of Appeal decision, officers do not consider this site to be truly isolated, given the proximity of dwellings to the north and south of the site, including the applicant's accommodation, which is identified by the yellow star that you see on screen. Applying policy RA4 to this case, financial stability is not contested, given the scale of investment, and in addition to the breeding and rearing of animals and ongoing day-to-day activities and management that is typical of many agricultural businesses. Acton Mill provides education and care up to 60+ people with on-site accommodation. It's accepted that any potential issues are dealt with expediently, both for the welfare and to prevent harm occurring to the business. Whilst it's entirely accepted that the sooner such incidents are dealt with, the better, the existing accommodation used by the applicant to date has not presented itself with issues in terms of the need of the enterprise. Of course, policy RA4 sets out that proposals will only be supported where the identified functional need cannot be met in existing accommodation, and that the close proximity of the care manager's current accommodation, as denoted by the yellow star, allows a prompt response to issues on site. And given the level of active involvement of the care manager, significant weight should be afforded to the availability of this dwelling. Put simply, the need for accommodation for this enterprise is already met. Preference should also be given to the conversion of suitable buildings before new development. Permission was granted in 2018 for the conversion of an agricultural building within Acton Mill for new supported living accommodation, which is denoted by the blue star on screen. This is yet to commence, and this permission will also lapse in November this year. Modest weighting could therefore also be afforded to this if there is no intention to implement that particular permission. There are also 2 3-bedroom dwellings at Pippin Green near Acton Beecham, which is 1.25 miles west of the site, and that modest weighting can also be afforded to this. The enterprise therefore is being met by existing accommodation. And whilst noting that the watermill is Grade 2 listed and that alterations to it would require planning permission and listed building consent, the applicants have not investigated the potential of extending the property, and there have been no discussions with officers to this effect. And furthermore, there may be scope under the 2018 permission for the conversion of the building on site to be amended with a new application to meet this need. These are both options that should be fully investigated and discounted before considering granting permission for a new dwelling at this location. Notwithstanding the above, the application must be considered on the basis of that it will meet a demonstrable functional need for an agricultural worker, and as outlined above, the need is being met by existing accommodation, namely the applicant residing in accommodation in their ownership and which has no agricultural occupancy restriction on it. Given the proposal is to be assessed as an agricultural workers dwelling and for no other exception, your officers view that the application is contrary to policies RA3 and RA4 of the core strategy, which is consistent with the NPPF. The next few slides are going to be photographs of the site to provide some visual context, and in assisting members, an annotated slide of the image currently on screen will indicate where photos are taken from. So if I could have the next slide, please. In which this first photograph is taken from the southeast of site, looking in a north and northwest direction. And the next slide, please, which is again just taken from the southeast of the site, looking now towards a west-northwest direction. And the next slide, thank you, which is taken from Public Bridle Way AB17, which runs to the north of site. And here we are looking in a south-southeast direction. And the next slide, please, in which you'll see photographs showing visibility onto the unclassified public highway. And as confirmed by the Transportation Area Engineer, there are no highways objections to the proposal, with parking and turning areas is suitable, according with policies SS4 and MT1 of the core strategy, which is consistent with Section 9 of the NPPF. And the next slide, please, in which is taken just on the edge of the unclassified public highway next to the entrance to Acton Mill, and is looking south towards the applicant's existing accommodation at the watermill. So members clearly have an understanding of the relationship to the site. And the next slide, please, in which in assessing other aspects of the proposal, members will note that there are not considered to be any reservations in respect of design, residential amenity, landscape impact, heritage, ecology, highways and drainage. The dwelling will be built reflecting modern standards of construction and is brought forward as a low carbon build. And the next slide, please. In which, in summarising, the application is made on the premise that a new dwelling is required to satisfy a sustained essential functional need for a care manager to live permanently on site to manage the enterprise. Evidently, the availability of existing dwellings, potential conversion of buildings, and proximity of other dwellings more than adequately accommodates the need of the enterprise. Your officers have identified clear conflict with policies RA3 and RA4 of the core strategy, which is consistent with the NPPF. In engaging the planning balance, namely paragraph 11 of the NPPF, a new agricultural workers dwelling here is without justification, noting that the conflict with the development plan when considered as a whole. And this conflict is identified to be significant as it relates to the principle. This would not be significantly or demonstrably outweighed by the benefits, notwithstanding why the application has been brought forward, which is to provide bespoke accommodation for the applicant's son/grandson. And whilst officers consider that weight can be afforded to this consideration, members are mindful that there are other alternatives that meet this need already and which have not been fully explored. Officers therefore consider that there is no sufficient justification to grant permission for a new dwelling in this location, as there is not an exceptional circumstance at this time, and accordingly, refusal is therefore recommended for the reason given in the officer report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Very clear presentation. We now have one public speaker, Mrs. Hooper, the applicant, who has made a video submission. So can I request that that video be played now, please? I don't think we've got any sound.
Sorry, Chairman, bear with me.
Hi, I'm Sophie, and this is my son Jack. He was born 18 months ago with severe life-threatening health conditions. One of these is he has a tracheostomy, and he is vented 24/7. The equipment required for this is extremely heavy and bulky, and due to the layout of our house, over 3 floors, it makes
Sorry, Chair, the volume's too quiet. I can't hear it.
Jack's medical supplies is also problematic.
Yes, I can't hear it either.
Next door with
Right.
Chair, I'm afraid that is the volume of the video. I
Right.
can't make that any louder.
Okay.
What I will say is, I believe Mrs. Hooper may actually be in our waiting room.
Right. Well, I found the recording quiet as well, but I turned the volume up on my computer and I could hear it fine. So if members could turn their volumes up on their computers, and we'll make one more attempt to play in the video first, I think, before we move any further. And if members are still unable to hear Mrs. Hooper on the video, if she is in the waiting room, perhaps we could invite her in to say a few words.
Okay, Chair, would you like me to try sharing now? Is everyone happy to?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Son Jack. He was born 18 months ago. Hi, I'm Sophie, and this is my son Jack. He was born 18 months ago with severe life-threatening health conditions. One of these is he has a tracheostomy, and he is vented 24/7. The equipment required for this is extremely heavy and bulky, and due to the layout of our house, over 3 floors, it makes everyday life very challenging. Storage of Jack's medical supplies is also problematic. We have had to temporarily store a large amount next door with Matt's mother Rosemary, which is obviously not ideal or a long-term solution. As you can see from the video we sent, the internal layout of the mill prevents adaptations being easily made. The application we have made would also allow Jack to be more integrated into family life, which is so important to us. Jack's medical conditions require carers throughout the day and overnight. While this is necessary, it has a massive impact on our family life, especially with Jack's siblings aged 9 and 11, who have coped extremely well given the circumstances. Due to Matt's work commitments, with the day-to-day responsibilities of running the care farm, together with the welfare of the animals, it is imperative that Matt lives on site, not only for the security of the livestock, but also for the safeguarding of the 3 individuals with learning disabilities who live here at the farm. Thank you very much for your time, and please support our application.
Chairman, I would have to say, even with the volume, my volume on my turned up to absolute maximum, it was still difficult to.
Right, okay. Is anybody else in that position? I see nobody else.
Yeah, I had difficulty hearing it as well.
You did, okay. Is Mrs. Hooper in the waiting room or not?
Chairman, just to add that I have a copy of the written statement from her, if that would help as an alternative. Thank you. Okay,
right. Is Mrs. Hooper in the waiting room, Jen?
Chairman, I believe it's Mrs. Hooper. I have a name of Hoops. I would gather that that is her. I obviously can't be 100% sure, so I'm not sure if we ought to go with the safe option of the clerk reading out the statement. I will leave that for you to decide.
Right. If Mr. Brown has got the written statement in front of him, I'll ask him to read that out then, please.
Right. Hi, my name is Sophie. Our son Jack was born 18 months ago with severe life-threatening health conditions. One of these is he has a tracheostomy and it vents 24/7. The equipment required for this is extremely heavy and bulky, and due to the layout of our house over 3 floors, it makes everyday life incredibly challenging. Storage of Jack's medical equipment and supplies is also problematic. We have had to store a large amount of equipment next door in Matt's mother's, Rosemary's, dining room, which is obviously not ideal or a long-term solution. As you can see from the video, the internal layout of the mill prevents adaptations being easily made. The application we have made will also allow Jack to be more integrated into family life, which is especially important for our and his mental health. Jack's medical conditions require carers throughout the day and overnight. While this is needed, it has a massive impact on our family life, especially Jack's siblings aged 9 and 11 who have coped extremely well given the trying circumstances. Due to Matt's work commitments with the day-to-day responsibility running the care farm, together with the welfare of animals, it is imperative that Matt lives on site, not only for the security of the livestock, but also for the safeguarding of 3 individuals with learning disabilities who live here at the farm. Thank you very much for your time. Please support our application. And that concludes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. I think everybody should had a really good opportunity of understanding Mrs. Hooper's statement. So I now call upon Councillor Chowns, who is the local ward member for this item. She will be given the opportunity of speaking first and then has the right to end the debate as well, but she will not get a vote on this application. So over to Councillor Chowns, please.
Thank you, Councillor Harwick, and thank you, colleagues. While I understand the material put forward by the officer, I'd like to ask you to consider to afford significant weighting to the particular needs of the particular family in this particular set of circumstances. This really is an exceptional case, taking into account the severe disability of Jack Hooper that you heard explained just then, and the associated specific care requirements for him, coupled with the requirements for his father, who's the care farm manager, to live on site. I understand that planning officers aren't kind of able to take this sort of formally into account, but I hope that as the committee, you've all had the chance to read the letter from the applicant's agent, which details a lot of detail about the circumstances of this family and of Jack's disability and the associated care needs. And as you will have seen from that, this application is strongly supported by the council's own disabilities team in children's services. So Jack's care needs mean that the existing accommodation on site in the watermill is completely unsuitable. It's on 3 floors. I do actually have another video that I can show you of exactly what that means for the family having to kind of carry all of this heavy equipment up and down stairs and so forth. So a new build bungalow, as detailed in the application, is really essential to enable him to live with the support of his family on site. And I understand it, the sole reason for the planning officer's recommendation for refusal is that there's an existing accommodation, there's an existing farm workers accommodation on site, but that accommodation is not at all suitable for Jack's needs. And any application for changes to that accommodation is a grade 2 listed building. You know, a proposal to kind of convert that and add a sort of bungalow bit on the end of it might well be refused itself. It could be more harmful than what is proposed here, which, as you've seen from the document, is fully supported by all of the submissions from local residents. There are no technical objections from any of the kind of consultees. It's simply the question of whether the need for this development outweighs the kind of, you know, the principle of no development. And in this case, because of the exceptional circumstances, I really do believe it does. I understand that committee's taken similar decisions over the past 18 months or so in supporting rural enterprises that have had a particular need. I understand, contrary to officers' recommendation, including, I believe, at Docklow Pools and Bowling Green Farm in Cleehonga. I think in terms of the sort of the planning legislation, the relevant paragraphs of the NPPF, for me, para 79A is particularly relevant, can allow for development where there's an essential need for a rural worker to live permanently at or near their place of work in the countryside. It's clearly essential for Matt Hooper to live on site because of his responsibilities as the care farm manager, both to the animals, but also to the people who live on site as well. And it's clearly essential for his family to have accommodation suitable for the severe care needs of their son. Para 77, in rural areas, planning policies and decisions should be responsive to local circumstances, support housing developments that reflect local needs. This is clearly the case here. 78, to promote sustainable development in rural areas, to enhance or maintain, strong rural communities. Again, this is a viable local business, been going nearly 20 years, providing really valuable services to the wider community. And so this is also consistent with the council's core strategy policies, RA6 and RA4, supporting the retention of agricultural businesses. So in summary, I believe that the principle of sustainable development would be upheld with this application. The particular exceptional circumstances of the family are a really strong, persuasive argument, I think, for this particular for the council the committee to give significant weight to the particular requirements of Jack Hooper and his family here. Thank you. And in the agent's letter, and I think also in the statement just there, reference was made to a video of the internal layout of the property. I do apologise. I'd understood that would be circulated to the committee. I hadn't realised it would be my responsibility to do it. I do have that video here, and I can show it to you, or I can email it to you now. It just shows the family walking with Jack through the staircases and just demonstrating how tricky that is for them.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I think that members will be fully aware of the circumstances, so I don't think that video will be necessary. But if you wish to email it to members, that's entirely at your discretion. Right, we now move into the debate proper then, and first I have Councillor Rowan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I read the report over the weekend, and as much as I try in loads of detail, I just couldn't see past the overarching need for a one-level home for this family. I think Jack's parents and I believe grandparents are probably best placed to know what is required for him. He may be a little boy now, but what little boys do is grow up, and the challenges that lay ahead as he gets older will only become more profound. I absolutely applaud them for looking to future-proof their situation and the care that he will need as he gets a bit bigger and big lumpier. It's quite easy to carry a 2-year-old around at the moment, but when he gets to 12, there won't be any lumping him around. We should be supporting families at every opportunity, especially as this family are trying to help themselves and do what is best for this little man. Acton Beauchamp Parish Council have got no objections, Chair, and I don't think we should either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowan. Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously I totally agree with what Councillor Chowns has said and what Councillor Rowan has just said. The care needs of Jack are obviously need to be taken above what the planning rules are. So I can see that there is an absolute need for a purpose-built accommodation. But my only concern here is the actual design of the proposed building. So I'm looking at the design. It's a sort of an L-shaped thing on a plot of land. none of the roofs are facing due south. So it's right back to this old thing about orientation of buildings. Now, I'm not for a moment saying that we shouldn't pass this application. What I'm asking is, why have we been put in a position where we even have to consider the shape of the building over Jack's care? How come this hasn't been sorted out? How come somebody in the planning department hasn't said to these people, why don't you just change the design of your bungalow a bit so that it can have, you know, a proper south-facing roof, and future-proof it, not just for Jack's care, but for making sure that it has a sustainable energy source for the future? It just astonishes me that no one has addressed this problem, and we're being put in a position of having to choose one or the other. On this occasion, of course, I'll vote for Jack, but I'm absolutely appalled that the planning department haven't sorted this out before it came to this committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilding. Councillor Milne, followed by Councillor Swinglehurst.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could ask the case officer to elaborate a little bit more on the on application 181666, which was approved in 2018 but not implemented. This is for the conversion of existing farm buildings on site for supported living accommodation. I mean, I instinctively share the views of the speakers so far that we desperately want to help this family if we possibly can, but we still need to be mindful of the opportunities for doing so in a way that is compliant with policy. Okay, thank you.
Right, I think that's probably worthy of a response from Mr. Bailey. If he could sort of enlighten us with regards to the previous application for the conversion of one of the buildings on the farm.
Thank you, Chairman. As I said, it literally was just an application to provide effectively additional living accommodation for any on-site residents as part of Acton Mill's ongoing operations. When I visited the site with the applicant back in January, when I had a meeting with them, the permission currently hadn't been implemented at that time. Of course, the applicant still has the opportunity to begin implementing that permission before it lapses in November. And should they wish to implement that permission, that of course then that permission then becomes extant, and the matter of the potential of that building then being converted then realistically falls away. Of course, as members will have seen in the report, the position taken by officers appreciates that the existing accommodation meets the needs of the enterprise, and as that's what we're being asked to assess the application on, unfortunately. Whilst I completely I appreciate completely the exceptional circumstances that this application has been brought forward on, and I completely understand that. And we have, obviously, members would have seen in the report, we have afforded weight to that position. Members would appreciate the conflict that we've identified does relate to the principle, and that is essentially the need of an agricultural workers dwelling. But as I said, going back to the point of the converted building, if that permission is implemented before November 2021, then that would fall, the matter of that building potentially being converted would fall away. So then you would simply then have the existing accommodation that you currently have got at the watermill, and then also, as I highlighted in the report, the two dwellings that you could potentially purchase at Acton Beecham.
Yeah, I've got to admit that I didn't look at the previous application, but could you sort of enlighten us as to whether it's a two-storey building or a one level?
That is currently at one level as well.
It is one level. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Councillor Swinglehurst, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could have clarification as to whether or not personal circumstances are a material consideration, that would be helpful. I'm grateful to Councillor Mill. I think he raised a very good point. For me, an application to build an open countryside against our adopted planning policies is something that would be wholly exceptional, should only ever be wholly exceptional if it doesn't fulfil the requirements, the criteria of the exceptions already provided for within RA3 and RA4. And I'm inclined to agree with the officer here that this does not fulfill those criteria, simply because there are other options. Had those options been exhausted, had it been absolutely this is the last thing that is possible, then one would have to give it very due consideration. And as Councillor Mill so eloquently put it, that we would wish to try to do what we can within policy. The trouble is that I don't feel I don't feel that these alternatives have been exhausted. Neither the potential for extending the listed building, which I absolutely accept would be complex, but also this additional planning permission that is outstanding and could be used, and that gives me is a problem for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James, followed by Councillor Selden.
Thank you, Chairman.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I have an answer to my initial question about whether or not personal circumstances are a material consideration?
Certainly. Can I ask Mr. Bailey to respond?
As I think we've clarified in the officer report and the presentation, we can afford some weight to the personal circumstances of this. I would think that if members felt that there was exceptional grounds for permitting such a dwelling on this basis, and if it fits with conditions criteria, you could almost look to insert a personal condition which solely applies to the family in general, if members are of the view that there are exceptional circumstances which would otherwise go contrary to officer recommendation, improving it with a personal condition solely for the benefit of that family. Because I think there would be difficulties, as members will have seen in the email that was circulated by the applicant's agent, it would be difficult to implement a Section 106 agreement. And that you also could have an agricultural condition with an agricultural workers type, but if members felt that there really were exceptional circumstances with this application, to perhaps look at a personal condition which would solely benefit the applicant's family.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bailey. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. These are exceptional circumstances. I don't think you would have great difficulty in finding more exceptional circumstances than these. We grant planning permissions for various things. If it was a massive poultry unit, we'd be granting planning permission for 1-2 bungalows. Be aware of the social and humanitarian benefit that this enterprise has for the community as a whole. I do hope, and I will move, that the planning permission be granted under exceptional circumstances. I believe the local member mentioned RA6, RA4, and any other conditions that they have. I think we need to be mindful of the benefits that this enterprise have, and to the family of the operators of this enterprise. I wholeheartedly propose that we give planning permission for this development.
Okay, thank you, Councillor James. I take that as a proposal to approve contrary to officer recommendation. Have I a seconder, please? Councillor Rowan. I move on to Councillor Selden, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We always get the difficult ones, and I have absolute sympathy with Mr. Bailey in struggling with this application and the way it goes through. For me, what sways it is Councillor Chowns' application, the NPPF interpretations of exceptional circumstances and exceptions that are, I think it's section 79 of the NPPF that allow us as a local authority to make exceptions in exceptional circumstances. And I agree with Councillor James. It would be quite difficult to find more exceptional circumstances than this, though I do hear what Councillor Swinglehurst is saying about how we have to balance that out with building an open countryside only in those very exceptional circumstances. But for me, having seen the circumstances that inside those properties, that just swings it towards approving this as giving this the go ahead, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Selden. Councillor Polly Andrews, followed by Councillor Fagan.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just clarify, please, the previous planning application that has not been implemented, which we've just been told is one story, is that in the grade 2 listed building or not?
It's not, Councillor Andrews. It's within Acton Mill itself. Within the presentation, it was identified by the blue star on the screen.
Thank you.
Mr. Bishop, did I see you indicate that you wanted to speak or not?
No, Chairman, not yet.
Okay, fine, thank you. Have you finished, Councillor Polly Andrews?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would have to say I would agree with Councillor James and Councillor Selden. This is a very specific request. We have given in the past planning permission for similar things on personal circumstances, and I would support this support the application to allow the building of this cottage.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Andrews. We've momentarily lost our timer, but I know Mrs. Priest is trying to recover that. Councillor Fagan, please.
Thank you. I just want to say that actually I support this application. I mean, I can see the difficulties with the policies on open countryside, but I think that the NPPF does provide us with a route through that. And what I did want to say is that the current application for supported living accommodation, that's different to providing a family home for this family to grow up in. And I just wondered whether sort of things like permitted development rights on a property like this that was sort of tied to the agricultural had an agricultural tie to the site. Would this property have permitted development rights, and is that you know, something that we should consider within this application, whether those should be removed? But otherwise, I do support this application. I can see completely the need for this and the exceptional circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fagan. I've no further speakers showing currently. Councillor Bowen.
Mr. Chairman, I've lost communication with you entirely for considerable length of time, so I cannot vote on this matter.
Okay, fine, thank you. That had been noted. Councillor Swinglehurst, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I, in that case, suggest the condition for personal use?
Right, I'm sure we'll get clarification on that from Mr. Bishop. We've got no further speakers, so I'll draw that debate to a close, other than invite Mr. Bishop to make some comments before I go back to Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. A very difficult situation. I appreciate that for members. However, I must remind members this is a planning committee, not a social care committee. And in that respect, you are looking at an application for a agricultural workers dwelling. If they'd have wanted to bring the application forward with everything you are looking at today, they would have presented it in that manner. You are looking at a straightforward agricultural bungalow application where they've already got another property on the site and permission for another one as well. You've got 3 on there. There's no justification for any agricultural tie to it. There's no justification for any removal of permitted development rights. And in fact, when you look at the layout of the property, I would suggest they will need to extend it in the future. So why would you want to inhibit that extension if you did grant permission for it? I'm sorry I have to be hard on this, but those are the hard facts of it. It's a dwelling in the open countryside, what you're looking at. Exceptional circumstances, personal circumstances do apply. Generally, that is only to agricultural workers, for agricultural workers to live on the land which they're farming. In this particular instance, there is accommodation on there. I accept what members are saying. If they so wish, then please be aware you are granting an open permission for a dwelling in the open countryside. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bishop. I think that's made it very clear. Before I go back to Councillor Chowns, Councillor Selden.
So just to be clear, Mr. Bishop, it would seem to me from what you've just said, this is the wrong kind of application for this particular circumstance, where perhaps they should have asked for something different rather than what they've asked for here.
Absolutely, and then officers could have advised, and as regards Councillor Wilding's accusations about the department not helping, they could have assisted. But this is clearly an application for an agricultural workers dwelling in the open countryside where there's already accommodation on the farm.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bishop. Councillor Chowns, please.
Thank you. Well, from my perspective as the ward member for this family, what I'm concerned about is that they're able to have accommodation that's suitable for their needs and that kind of sustains what is an important local business that provides important services to the wider community. While it's kind of technically an open countryside, it's actually kind of essentially filling in a gap between the existing farm and the kind of two 1960s houses that just a kind of couple of fields up. So there's no, as the report makes clear, there's no kind of landscape harm, so it satisfies policy LD1. There's no objections to it basically on any technical or kind of local grounds. It's purely a kind of question of the development principle. On the question of alternatives, to my mind, converting the Watermill House is really not a runner. It's a Grade 2 listed building, and so making building a bungalow that's kind of designed for the lifetime needs of this family seems a much more sensible way around it. And although there is an existing planning permission on another part of the property on the site, that is the planning permission related to the business of the site, which is about running a care farm, and it is about kind of providing accommodation for people with other sorts of disabilities. And so I think what Jack's family needs is a solution now that is going to kind of enable them to care for their son for the duration of his life. And the committee might want to consider various conditions, if you wish, around that building. But fundamentally, that's what the family need now. They need permission to build a bungalow that's suitable both for Jack's needs and for their need to be right on site to run the care farm, which is a business and a kind of social value business. And I don't see that either of the alternatives that have been mentioned are better options to achieve that. So I urge committee to approve this application, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chowns. Right. Now we've got a proposal to approve this contrary to officer recommendation. Councillor James proposed, Councillor Rowan seconded. We will need reasons for this going contrary to officer recommendation. So I invite Councillor James and Councillor Rowan to give those reasons.
I think, that within our planning policies, we have the exceptional circumstances. And as I said earlier, I cannot think of a more exceptional circumstance than this. This is not only a rural business, it's of social benefit to the whole of the community. And therefore, I think Councillor Chowns mentioned RA6, RA4. I think the condition tying it perhaps to the particular family might be appropriate. But apart from that, I think that, the exceptional circumstances clause within our planning policies is sufficient to approve this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rowan, did you want to add any?
No, I don't want to add anything. I think Councillor James has given the reasons that probably a majority of those who put their hand up to second this would agree with. So I'll go with as Councillor James has suggested, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Evans, would you like to make any comment Are you satisfied?
I have nothing further to add, Chair. I just wanted to know from a clarification for obviously the reasons. Is Mr. Bishop, Mr. Bailey happy with the policies put forward of RA6, RA4? And is there any other further MPPF paragraphs that may be wanting to add to the reasons for obviously putting it forward for approval contrary to officer recommendation?
Chairman,
carry on, Mr. Councillor James.
Yeah, on prompting by Councillor Chance, I also have paras 77, 78 and 79A and 83 of the NPPF plus para 8 of the NPPF also be added.
Okay, thank you. So are we clear on that, Mrs. Evans? Are you happy that we can go to the vote?
If those paragraphs apply, Mr. Bishop can obviously clarify that. And as far as the personal condition goes, just for clarification, that a personal condition will be applied to the planning permission tying this building to for the use of the family only. Is that correct?
I believe that's what was suggested, yes. Okay.
Just to say, Chairman, that RA4 and RA6 do not apply. You should refer to RA3 as your policy responding to it.
Right. Can I have confirmation from the proposer and seconder that they're content with that alteration?
Yes. Yes,
Good.
Chairman.
I believe that we're ready to go to vote then. So we have a proposal on the table and seconded for approval of this application, contrary with the condition mentioned plus the policies that were highlighted. So can I have confirmation that the electronic voting system is ready and to confirm the number of eligible voting committee members for this poll?
Yes, Chairman, the eligible voting number is 14 and members may vote now.
Thank you. So the options are for approval of this application, contrary to the officer's recommendation, against or abstain.
Okay, Chair, all votes are in. 12 votes for and 2 against.
Okay, fine, thank you. So I can confirm that that application has been approved, and I'd now like to stop the live streaming, please. We're going to have a 10-minute break before we too slow today.
Okay, Chair, you can continue.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody back to the meeting following our adjournment. Can I please request that the public speakers for agenda item 7 attending as virtual attendees, Mrs. Gill, and who's a local resident, and Mr. Andrews, the applicant's architect, are admitted into the meeting. Good morning to you both. I trust that you can hear me. Could you just confirm if you turn your microphones on so that just to confirm that I can hear you?
Mute. Hello, yes, I can hear you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I can see and hear you. Thank you. Mr. Andrews?
Yes, I can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to welcome you to the meeting, and I'll call upon you to speak following the officer's presentation in due course. Item 7 on the agenda, second application this morning. This is Application number 202391, Riverside Flats, Y Street, Ross-on-Wye. The proposed conversion of an extension to the existing Riverview Flats building to form 6 two-bed apartments with new end staircores and additional story above. We have Heather Carlisle, Planning Officer, that is going to make the presentation this morning. Local ward councillor is Councillor Stark, who will speak first and then has the right to speak at the end of the debate, but he does not get a vote. I'm looking for, oh, I can see Councillor Stark now, so he is with us. So without further ado, if I could ask Mrs. Carlisle to make the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members of this committee. The application site is identified in the usual manner by the red star. The recommendation in front of members this morning is for a refusal as detailed within paragraph 6.8 of the committee report, stating the reasons for refusal. This is a full application for the proposed conversion extensions to the existing Riverview Flats to form 6 two-bed apartments with the addition of new end stair cores, an additional story which raises the height of the building by 2.96 metres. The application has been redirected to Planning Committee by the ward member Councillor Stark due to a number of representation both in support and against received during the application determined process. You'll note these within paragraphs 5.2 and 5.3 of the committee report. As a procedural matter, and this was included on the update sheet issued yesterday, since the publication of the agenda, further clarification has been sought from ecology colleagues, and officers wish to revise the recommendation with the removal of refusal reason 5, which relates to the habitats regulation assessment. The outstanding matter in regards to the surface water can now be secured via condition and thus requires the removal of this refusal reason. As such, there are now 5 reasons for refusal, not 6. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you.
Could I ask you to just move your microphone slightly, getting a little bit of sort of interference? Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Apologies. I hope this is better. Is that better?
Yeah, that is better. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chair. This slide shows the application site in a bit more detail. This slide shows the extent of the application site as outlined in red. The site is an existing vacant and rundown block of flats. The site is located within the Ross-on-Wye Conservation Area and is within the Wye Valley Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. And as such, these are statutory designations in regards to landscape and both heritage. And the River Wye is located in close proximity to the site to the north. There is a significant change in level between the 2 highways in the form of Wye Street and Wilton Road, and as such there is a steep bank at the rear of the application site. Riverview Flats is located at the end of the sloping part area of Wye Street, and the site as seen on the slide is linear in its appearance. Wye Street runs immediately to the front of the property. Members will note that the application is in the historic market town of Ross-on-Wye, which is famous for its landmark historic views and being the birthplace of the tourism industry. It is often described as the southern gateway to Herefordshire and the Wye Valley. Ross-on-Wye has an abundance of listed buildings and a large conservation area. This locality is part of an iconic and chocolate box view of the townscape. The site has been within the same ownership for about 10 years, and as background, the site had an approval in 2015, which has now lapsed, which proposed refurbishing the existing building and extending the building to form a new house. This scheme proved to be economically unviable and therefore not implemented. A further 2 applications have been submitted prior to the application in front of members today. However, both of these were withdrawn. Pre-application discussions were also undertaken prior to the submission of this application. With the supporting information, it discloses that it is not economically viable to refurbish the existing building without adding at least 2 additional units to the development. However, no supporting information has been submitted to justify this. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. This slide shows the proposed extent of the extensions within the site. However, members will be aware, as well as the proposed extensions to the side and the rear, there is also a vertical increase to provide an extra floor, which raises the ridge by 2.96 metres. The existing building is orientated southwest to the northeast and is raised and has a raised level area to the rear and the steep bank up to Wilton Road. It can be seen that to the northeast are grade 2 listed terraced houses, and the proposal includes the addition of an additional car parking space inserted between the proposed extended building and number 14 Wise Street. Access to the flats will be via external steps and can be seen on the proposed plans. There is a rear community amenity area. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. This slide shows the existing site and the block of flats which was built in around the 1970s. You can see that the existing building is currently in disrepair and currently cordoned off with temporary fencing and has had smashed windows which are now boarded up for safety reasons. The building has been unoccupied since about 2016. The existing two flats are four flats which are two bedrooms arranged over the 2 stories. The accommodation is at the 1st and 2nd floor with 4 vehicle parking spaces located at ground floor. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. As members can see from this slide, the proposed new look and extensions will completely remodel the existing building and incorporate extensions in a contemporary form. The scheme has prominent front gables, one at either end of the building and one centrally. There is an overall increase in the building height, as well as bringing the building line forward. It is noted that the Town Council has raised concerns in regards to the proposed materials, and it is acknowledged that the use of materials is an important consideration. Proposed materials are going to include a mixture of slate cladding, render, stone cladding, painted brickwork over a slate roof with grey fenestration. As can be seen from the proposed elevations, undercroft car parking will remain, and there'll be a more simple flat roof extension proposed to the rear. Can I have the next slide, please? This slide shows the proposed floor plans over the 4 floors. The proposed ground floor will contain car parking for 4 vehicles, as well as space for cycle storage, communal bin store, as well as communal entrances at either end for the flats. The 3 proposed floors for residential accommodation will be 2 times 2 bedroom flats with a kitchen, dining area, sitting area, and a bathroom. A private balcony area proposed on the street elevation, which is Wise Street, for the flats on the 1st floor, and windows are proposed on the rear elevation, as well as access onto a small private decking area. Access again will be via communal stair. The proposed 2nd and 3rd floor properties with the same configuration, but without the benefit of the front balcony. But they will also have access to a rear communal area. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. The property to the rear, known as the Ice House, can be seen on this slide. Members will note refusal reason 3 relates to concern raised in respect to the proposed extensions by reason of their height, scale and bulk, and their relationship and concerns in regards to impact on the amenity of adjoining neighbours. This concern relates primarily to the Ice House located to the rear, as can be seen on this photo, which has habitable windows as well as a private outdoor space. Officers have also raised concern in regards to the proposed bulk and scale in regards to the buildings directly opposite Wise Street. Can I have the next slide, please? This slide shows the location of the proposed development in its street context. Even though the site is close to the River Wye, it lies predominantly within flood zone 1, albeit the southern western corner is within flood zone 2. However, the site is in an area of low probability of flooding. Members will also be aware there is a reason for refusal in regards to lack of up-to-date detailed ecological survey in reference to bats. And as detailed within the report, the local planning authority has a duty of care to ensure this is considered as part of the planning process. It is noted and acknowledged that the applicant and agent are willing to address this reason for refusal. However, the reason refusal is still valid at this point. You'll note from the report that both landscape officers and the tree officer has raised no objection to the proposals. Officers acknowledge representation received in regards to highway safety and car parking provision. As detailed within the report, there is no highway objection to the principle of the redevelopment. However, it is noted the proposal seeks to increase the number of apartments to 6 and create 1 additional space, resulting in a total of 5 car parking spaces. This, however, does leave one of the apartments with no parking provision. However, officers are comfortable this could be made acceptable by reviewing these provisions and advancing mitigation. Can I have the next slide, please? Again, this slide adds to the context and streetscape and roofscape along Y Street. Members will note the existing roof heights, which are decreasing down the street, and the mix of building materials. You'll note the inclusion of the photograph in the right-hand corner from the Ross NDP within the heritage section, which clearly shows the street and emphasises this iconic view of the street. However, officers do accept the current Riverview Flats building is not visible from the A40, although as detailed within the report, the site is visible from much of Y Street. It is acknowledged that the scheme under consideration has been reduced from the previously withdrawn scheme and has revised elements in light of constructive pre-application advice received. However, there is still concern from officers regarding the massing of the proposed building, in particular the front gables and roof height. The current design results in the building appearing overbearing and out of place within the open character of the northern side of this street. While it is recognised that some efforts have been made to step the first and second floors inward, this is limited and the design still appears incongruous and awkward within the streetscape. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. This slide clearly highlights that Riverside Flats is situated within the Ross and Y Conservation Area, as well as being adjacent to a number of Grade 2 listed buildings and in close proximity to nearby key landmark buildings and listed buildings. In addition, the Riverside Inn and numbers 22 and 23 Y Street, which is situated opposite, are considered to be non-designated heritage assets. Officers have confirmed within the report there is no heritage objection to the conversion adaptation of Riverview Flats. However, the current proposal, by virtue of its uncharacteristic scale, architectural form and materiality, would fail to satisfy the requirements of Section 66 and 72 of the Planning, Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act, namely to preserve the setting of the listed buildings and preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. As detailed by the Council Specialist Historic Buildings Advisor, one of Y Street's primary visual characteristics is its roofscape arrangement, which descends westwards along its southern side. This distinctive treatment, largely governed by the prevailing topography, defines views in both directions along the street. The current building's height and its form is, in your officer's views, more appropriate in terms of its minimal bulk and wider cohesion, and does not dominate its setting in any overt way. The Historic Buildings Officer has also raised concerns with the specification of render in the contemporary design context, as it provides little character. Can I have the next slide, please? Officers are mindful that officers are mindful that there have been letters of support and a petition in favour of the proposal, and your officers have been working with the applicant agent to try to resolve concerns within the current scheme before reaching today's recommendation for refusal. It is apparent that the site has been left to fall into disrepair and has been left unoccupied since 2016. However, in your officer's opinion, after working with the applicant for the last 18 months, this should not mean accepting anything on the site or accept this is the best we are going to get, and disregard the long-term lasting change to the proposal will have on the streetscape and potential harm to nearby residents, amenity and heritage assets. Members will be aware that officers have had to sensitively balance competing interests on the matters such as the building's current poor repair and the building looking like an eyesore within the street and this gateway area of the town with the heritage and conservation matters. Can I have the next slide, please? To sum up, your office acknowledged there is a mixture of both objections and support for the proposal. It does have the support from the ward councillor and general support from the town council. As set out in the report, the main points of contention in this case relate to the environmental role. In this respect, the site's proximity to nearby listed buildings and the non-heritage designated heritage assets, and the fact the site is located within the conservation area. Officers are also aware that Historic England have not raised an objection to the proposed development, and in their opinion regard the principle of redevelopment as being acceptable. However, as again detailed in the main body of the report, the Council's own building conservation officer, and as such a specialist officer looking at the local level, has raised significant concerns about the scale and height of the impact of the development on the nearby listed buildings, as well as the impacts upon the setting of the conservation area. As such, officers have concluded that the proposed development will result in harm, albeit this harm is considered to be less than substantial harm to the significance of the assets. Therefore, as detailed in the report, and I won't fully repeat, the correct approach to the decision-making process is to weigh this harm against the public benefits arising from the scheme in an unweighted balancing exercise. On balance, the harm arising from the development significantly outweigh the modest benefits, and the sum of the public benefits would not be sufficient to outweigh the less than substantial harm to the conservation area and the setting of the nearby heritage assets. The officers consider that the proposal would represent an incongruous overbearing addition to the host property and within the street and the surrounding conservation area, and as such the proposal is considered to be unacceptable. It's also considered that the proposed development would have an adverse amenity impact for adjoining neighbours. Whilst it is acknowledged that in due course an update ecology survey can be submitted, this cannot be established at this point in time, and therefore this has been included as a reason for refusal. Apologies. The potential benefits that could be delivered by the scheme have also been considered. However, officers are of the opinion that these do not outweigh the harm. It is accordingly recommended that planning permission be refused for the reasons set out in the report. However, please can I remind you, this is minus condition 5 for the HRA. Thank you, Chair. This brings me to the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Carlo. We have two public speakers this morning on this application. So I now invite Mrs. Gale to speak. And I'll remind you that you have 3 minutes in your own time, and we are quite strict on that 3 minutes. So if you can be succinct as possible. So as I say, in your own time, Mrs. Gale, thank you.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and good morning. Living opposite at 23 Wise Street, which is opposite the application side, I clearly have a vested interest in any development. But my objections to the proposed building and of the local residents I've been asked to represent go well beyond the concern for our own properties. I think that Ms. Carlisle has actually covered many of the points that we would want to emphasise. The fact that the current building's been an eyesore for many years and so on. We welcome redevelopment of the site, but believe that the proposal should not be agreed simply on the basis that anything is better than the present state of affairs. Choice of design will obviously be subjective, and we wouldn't suggest that it should be a pastiche of the vernacular. Part of the charm of the street is the harmonious blending of different styles and periods, but we believe that there should be far more consideration of the area generally. So our objections are twofold, both relating to the scale and increased height of the proposed building. First of all, as Ms. Carlisle has demonstrated very effectively and persuasively, I hope, with her slides, the destructive effect on the aesthetics of an area of outstanding natural beauty. And secondly, the unacceptable impact on adjacent buildings, not only ours, which will be affected by what I think is reason 3, but specifically the ice house. And the owner of the ice house has asked me to make a number of points, and I'll rattle through these. The proposed building is just 9 metres from her house windows to the current roof ridge. Adding another story will completely remove views, and the right to light will be seriously compromised. 4 of the 6 floors will have significantly reduced light in habitable rooms, and the detrimental psychological effect on the family should not be underestimated. Similarly, privacy. 3 habitable rooms will be directly overlooked and at very close proximity. Windows that currently look over the river will look directly into rooms on the upper floor of the proposed building. The only outside space for the ice house is 3 levels of decking, all currently private areas. All will be directly overlooked. And the new right-hand stairwell will go directly in front of the ice house and is not acceptable to her. But coming to the second all-important aesthetic consideration, I'm not sure whether the committee have been able to make a site visit, but if necessary, I would urge you to defer a decision until you've done so. Without being on site, it's not possible to appreciate fully the destructive effect of the proposed development. The area around Y Street and the Riverside is one of the most attractive and widely used parts of Ross. And as Ms. Carlisle has pointed out, its conservation area and so on. A rough count last week suggested that more than 200 people used the river path in one morning, not to mention the dogs. Y Street is the vista presented when approaching the town over Wilton Bridge. It's the front garden of Ross.
I'm afraid your 3 minutes is up.
Oh,
Mrs. Gale.
Goodness me. Okay.
Okay. So thank you very much for your time this morning. I'd now like to invite Mr. Andrews. Again, you have 3 minutes in your own time, please.
Thank you, Chair. Strideford Lane were appointed in late 2019 and worked with the applicant and local authority to understand the site's planning history and best way to take the project forward. A pre-app was submitted in February 2020 for a refurbishment and extension scheme for 6 two-bed flats. In response, this council gave positive feedback, including stating that this proposal would enhance the setting of adjoining listed buildings. Other comments from the pre-app guidance were taken on board and changes made to the design. As advised, the applicant met local residents and ward councillor to discuss the emerging proposals. Queries were answered and positive comments received, particularly in terms of the reduction in height. The scheme was then progressed and submitted. Street sections showed that the height of the building had been carefully calculated so as to avoid overbearing. The application also demonstrated that the roof form achieved the additional story by raising the ridge less than 2.7 metres. The ridge is not higher than the top of the wall on Wilton Road. The roof form would allow the eaves to match that of the adjacent listed building, aid daylighting to the northeast, minimise potential obstruction to the ice house, and create a southwest facing slope for an array of PV panels. Upon submission, there was considerable support from local social media news pages. Historic England were also supportive, and Ross Town Council had no objections. A signed letter of support from 20 Y Street residents was also received. The proposals present a number of benefits in terms of sustainability. By refurbishing and extending an existing building in this location, the proposals would bring in 6 new dwellings into the town centre and thus reduce the need for housing in less sustainable locations. It would also create a significant saving of embodied carbon, create less construction disruption, provide storage for at least 12 cycles, provide the potential for electric vehicle charging in the 4 gated garages, make use of the southwest facing roof to house an array of PV panels. Openings in the existing frame would be insulated to a high standard and rendered over. This is an achievable and sustainable method and references many of the properties in the area, including the gabled houses across Y Street. Areas of stone cladding with eaves onto the street reference the adjacent listed buildings. Ecologists revisited the site in November 2020 and plans had been in place to update reports as necessary. The applicant is happy to undertake ecology surveys and work towards biodiversity net gain by way of a condition. A drainage strategy can be produced to satisfy the suggested condition. Both ecology and drainage are aided by plans to only marginally increase the footprint of the building and retain the existing vegetation on the rear bank. In summary, the proposals would be respectful of the wider and immediate context and would greatly help improve this popular gateway to the town.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Andrews. I'd like to now ask that both virtual attendees leave the meeting, and I'd like to remind them that they can watch the live stream of this meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. But again, thank you very much for your input, and good day to you both. Right, we now move across to Ward Member for the area, Councillor Stark, who will speak first. Then he has the right to speak at the end of the debate, but he will not get a vote on this application. So in your own time, Councillor Stark.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I would like the committee to support this application. Mr. Andrews has certainly covered many of the points I was going to raise, but I think I would like to reiterate some of them. I would like the committee to give significant consideration to the fact that this is not a new build in a greenfield site in Ross Conservation Area, but it's nothing less than a transformation of what is a derelict building. A building that the planning officer has said has been derelict since 2017 or thereabouts, has certainly fallen into a greater state of disrepair since then, and I believe will continue to deteriorate if nothing is done about it in the near future. I would also like to draw the committee's consideration to the remarks of Historic England, where they do clearly say that they did have obvious concerns with previous applications, but they they believe that those considerations have now been addressed and that they would now no longer have any objections to this particular application. They should know, committee members, after all, their mission is to champion and protect English heritage environment. I would also like to draw the committee's attention to also the fact that the Town Council's Planning Committee has no objection to this particular application either. They are also local residents, they are also community leaders, and they guard quite jealously any development that might encroach on or spoil the historic built environment of Ross. And I would also like to try and balance the representations that have been made from Y Street on the application. Yes, as you've heard this morning, there are a number of objections. There are 9 objections in total, of which a few do live in Y Street. But also, as Mr. Andrews pointed out, as did the planning officer, there has been a petition from 20 residents in support of the application. And those 20 residents have said in their support that they have to live every day with this derelict site, every day with the negative impact it has on their everyday lives and also on their livelihoods, because a number of them run B&Bs in Y Street and they have guests who remark on this particular site, and I think that detracts from the area. And let's be honest, committee members, this site was nothing to write home about even when it was occupied. I mean, a visitor to Ross would not stand in front of it, whip out his mobile phone, take a couple of snaps and say, wow, this is exactly what I would remember Ross by. And even a Gilpin 18th century traveller from the past who was transported forward would not regard this site either occupied or in its derelict state as picturesque. Now, I know that some of the residents have objected to the application in terms of height and in terms of overall mass. But as Mr. Andrews has pointed out, and I would like to throw this into the mix, when the application was first posted onto Ross Online's Facebook on the 25th of August, it received over 100 likes and a number of comments which were in favour of the application. I think this shows the broad support beyond Y Street and even beyond Ross for this redevelopment to go ahead and for the goodwill towards this application as it stands. I should also add that the applications on this site have been through a number of manifestations, and this latest one has been party to a pre-application planning discussion. They've discussed it with me, they have discussed it with residents, and I believe overall that it does actually fit well within its context. Now, I come to the planning balance, and I think this is a crucial test here. The planning balance that the planning officer has described is an unweighted balancing exercise. That is, you simply weigh up the less than substantial harm caused by this development to the Ross conservation area against the overall benefits to be had. Can I ask the committee to consider the following benefits which I think will be realised if you accept the application? One is you will return vitality and a little bit of TLC to an area of Y Street that has for years being run down, neglected and unloved. Secondly, by removing this scar from our landscape with a sympathetic and complementary design, you will actually indeed improve the amenity for most, if not all, the residents of Y Street. I do accept that, but for most of the residents of Y Street, to the wider Ross community and to visitors to the town. And third, and equally important, you will return this site to a useful site. You will actually, by approving this application, you will create 6 new apartments within walking distance of the town centre, and I think that is a valuable benefit as well. I'm not an expert here in the planning regulations, but I have looked at this design. I was involved with the previous design. I do think the applicant has responded to concerns from residents, to concerns from planning officers in the past, and they've certainly satisfied me, and I would ask that the committee approves this application today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stark. We now go into the debate proper, and I'm looking for the first speaker. None showing at the moment. Councillor Milne.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. I'll kick off then. Ross on Y conservation area is one of only 2 of the 62 conservation areas in Herefordshire, which is on Historic England's at-risk register. So it's in special measures. I won't mention the other one because the ward councillor is in the room for the other one, but it does place a particular responsibility upon us to take cognizance of section 66 and 72 of the Planning and Listed Buildings Act, which is really the basis of the Historic Building Officer's objection. I note that Historic England's objection is, well, I'm sure they would say carefully nuanced. Historic England very often gives advice that is a little bit on the lukewarm side, shall we say. I hope they're not listening, but you really should, I think, pay as much attention to our own in-house historic buildings expert and the fact that he says underlined, and we should give this very great weight, the impact upon setting of this proposal of the adjacent listed buildings into the conservation area. It is a gateway site. We would expect much greater attention to massing and form and scale and materiality than is shown in this application. That's all I need to say on the moment. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councillor Milne. Councillor Swinglehurst, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's very frustrating, this application, because certainly what is there is not pleasing to the eye. And on first glance, you look at the proposal and go, well, that's an improvement, for sure. I like that it's 2 bedrooms. I think that's a good thing. I think, really want a scheme to come forward that will do something about this, the existing state of that building. However, I don't think that this is that scheme. I'm inclined to agree with our conservation officer that the sort of pleasing flow of roof lines it would be interrupted by this increase, the 2.6 metre increase in that roof line, and that would actually have quite a powerful effect on the way that street reads. Plus which I think the gable end on would be alien again on that side of the street, which is I think characterized by sort of horizontally linear emphases over vertical emphases, and then that is added to, I think, by the choice of materials in the proposed design. So it feels like this is an opportunity that is just not quite, it's very frustrating. I note that the conclusion of the officer is some form of 3-storey development could be accommodated on the site. And certainly I think that we would all wish to see something come forward, but it has to be, you know, I think the point is that in order to resolve what is a currently dilapidated and frankly ugly building, are we then going to say, well, it's not great, but it'll do for the new design? Or can we actually stretch and get something that works in the context, in the very important historical context of this conservation area and the gateway function that Ross has, and make it even better? And I do think that's possible. I think that there are potential improvements to this design, which I think would really make a fantastic contribution. But this is not it. I'm sorry. In my view, I'm inclined to agree with our conservation officer. Oh, and also I was going to say I have a question over the paragraph 4.6. As the minimum of presence or absence preliminary bat survey should be supplied before this application can be determined. And could we have some guidance on that, please?
Right. I'll go to the planning officer or Mr. Bishop for a response on that question.
If Heather, do you want to do
Yeah,
this?
sorry. Thank you, Chair. In respect to the bat survey, which I highlighted in both my presentation and in terms of the refusal reason, is that and I think the agent also updated, is that in regards to the bats, we were in discussion with the applicant and agent, but because we weren't proceeding with a more favourable recommendation, they didn't move forward with submitting that. So that's why it's down as a reason for refusal. But please, just to reiterate that the planning agent and the applicant are engaged with us, and they are happy to move forward and proceed with submitting that. It wasn't moved forward because we were moving towards a recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Just to clarify that point, Chairman, if members were minded to grant permission today, it would have to be delegated to officers subject to that bat survey coming in and being assessed, etc., because it may require a change to the scheme, and you would not be allowed, or you would not be permitted to grant an outright permission today, even if you so wished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's helpful advice. Councillor Wilding.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm still making my mind up on this one, really. I'll just make a couple of points. I absolutely welcome what the supporters of the application said outlined about sustainable aspects of this design, but just add to that of course those aspects actually must be incorporated in any design. So saying that this design will have them, from my point of view, doesn't mean we have to accept this design, because any design must have them. So my concern on the other side is the loss of the light and the view for the ice house because of the height increase. I know views cannot be owned, but it's been there for some while, and the roof is going up by a considerable amount and won't just affect views out the windows, but the light of their outside spaces. And one other point I just wanted to make, which I'll probably be told has got nothing to do with this application, but as members who don't know this area might not know, this isn't the only derelict rundown building in Y Street. Almost opposite this building is an old pub which has been derelict and run down for much longer, as in even worse and sorry state, mainly because it keeps getting flooded, because the area, the other side of this street, can often be under 4 or 5 foot of water. So that pub is just completely falling apart. So tidying up these buildings, while we absolutely want to do that, is not going to make the way to Ross-on-Wye any better because of the pub opposite. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We just had an indication that the recording had stopped. Can we clarify whether we're still live? I think Jen has disappeared. I think we might have lost Jen.
Yeah, I think that must be why the recording stopped, Chair, because
Yeah.
she's her link.
Can I take advice on that, Mrs. Evans?
Yeah, I just hold on, Chair, until we hear something further, because yes, the red light, as Councillor Wilding's pulled up, is actually not showing on there, and obviously Jen's not around. I would suggest just waiting until such time as we have as she comes back, if you can, rather than proceeding at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. I thought that's probably the advice that I would get. So if members just bear with me.
Chairman, can I ask for a quick comfort break after this application?
There is one, we do intend to have one for 10 minutes after this break, after this application.
Thank you.
But then we will run through on the third and fourth application without a break. Right, I think we've got Jen back with us.
Chairman, I understand we're still live. I've just had a message.
Right, well, I've got Mrs. Priest with us now. Can you confirm, please, that we are actually live?
Apologies, Chairman, my internet dropped out. I'm just be checking that now. It is actually coming up with an error message for me.
The recording is still showing live, and we've had confirmation externally that the recording was going all the way through. So at least we stopped. I would suggest we carry on now, Chair.
Okay, fine, thank you. If everybody's happy. Right, I now move to Councillor Bowen, please, followed by Councillor Selden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of good points have been made already, I think, but may I just say how glad I am to see that the planning officers and the planning department is taking such care of the planning and design of these buildings. And sometimes that in the past has not always been very apparent. But this is a very good report, I think, and I'm delighted to have the good input from Mrs. Carlyle. I think that's been very interesting. And we do have a duty, I think, to get the very best designs. And I think on this one, you could say could do better and should do better. And I would propose refusal of this particular design. I think we can work towards getting a much better one that would be more suitable for the area, more interesting architecturally, and generally fulfill all the requirements that were required, but are not being properly looked after now. So I would suggest we follow the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Have I a seconder for that proposal, please?
I'll second.
Councillor Swinglehurst. Thank you. Now move to Councillor Selden, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're in danger of saying with this one that something is better than what's there already, and I have to admit I know the building because for some reason I happened to be in that street a few months ago and thought then that this needs very careful consideration about what happens to it, and I understand where Councillor Stark is coming from, but I think we are in danger of saying that something is better than nothing with this, but I agree we need to do better with this one. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Selden. Councillor Fagan, followed by Councillor James, please.
Thank you, Chair. I find this application quite difficult because I can completely see why Ross and Y would want to get this site sorted out, and that if it's not economically viable for the developer to do it without raising the height, I can see that provides more difficulties. What I was going to say was that I would have asked for a deferral for a site visit, but I know there is a motion on the table. So if that motion fails, then I'll be asking for a deferral to be able to look at the site. Thank you.
You're muted, Councillor Hardwick.
My apologies. Councillor James, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I can understand why some members are concerned about this particular application, but refusal will mean that potentially that this terrible eyesore in Ross will remain there for many years to come. It's all very well, well, I'd like something else, something better, but ultimately we've got to realise that what is viable, and I agree with Councillor Fagan, I think, I would happily support a site meeting to look at what could be done. That I can understand the properties that will have less of a view, the ice house, etc. But we all understand that in planning law, no one is entitled to a view. So that's not applicable to this particular application. I do think there's a danger that Ross's Way is going to be left with an eyesore for the next 20 years, as has happened in many cases before. In order to do this, it has to be a viable development. And, I don't know that what some of us may want as the development would be viable. And I fear that we'll end up with this being there for many years to come.
Thank you, Councillor James. I've got no further speakers actually showing currently. Before I go to officers to make any comments, is there anybody else actually looking to speak? No, if not, Mr. Bishop, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, yes, a very difficult one for members here, where we have a site in a conservation area which is in a very poor state of repair. Officers have been working with the applicant to try and achieve an acceptable scheme. It got to a point there where the applicants wanted a decision on this application. As you'll see, it's quite clear that officers have recommended for refusal. You've got the advice within the report, and I would particularly draw your attention to the Principal Building Conservation Officer's advice. The fact that we've got a better scheme, which could be put anywhere, I would suggest. The design could be anywhere. It doesn't reflect the design of this particular part of Ross and Wye. I think speaks actual volumes that the scheme hasn't been designed around what we have within that particular locality, and the fact that we've got an undesirable situation with the site at the present time doesn't justify putting forward a mediocre scheme, which this is coming forward. I've heard members before say design, we want good design, we want quality design, and that's what officers are trying to attempt here. If it has to be on the back of a refusal to give officers greater strength to their arm, so be it, and that's what we are recommending. Just for clarity, Chairman, can I just confirm that reason number 5 is actually removed from the condition, because the ecologists said they could deal with that as a condition, but obviously moving forward, we would look to discuss that with them to ensure we have rainwater harvesting and things like that, which nothing of that is shown on the plans. In fact, as regards surface water, the application is silent. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bishop. Useful comments. I now move across to Councillor Stark to close the debate in your own time, please. Okay. Councillor Stark.
Well, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm disappointed to hear some of the comments from the Planning Committee. Everything is in the eye of the beholder, in my view. And certainly my conversations in Ross have shown that people like this application. They like the design that's before you. And I think I would like to at least draw that to your attention, that the people that have to live with this on the whole welcome this application. So that's the first thing I would like to say. As to Councillor Wilding's point about the Riverside pub, I didn't want to raise that in support of my case, because I didn't want to depress you any more about this area. It is unloved, it is run down, it's neglected, it's a disgrace. You have an opportunity today to try and do something about it. You have an opportunity to at least remove one of the eyesores. Now, this isn't an application that's been plucked up there. I think this is the fourth sort of iteration of applications that have been on this site. And I've been told that there has been extensive discussions with officers at the pre-application stage. And I do feel that if we do reject this particular application today, that there won't be another one. There is, as Councillor James said, it is also about economic viability. I've been pulled both ways here. I mean, I would have preferred for the existing flats to be refurbished. In fact, committee members, I would have preferred if the existing flats hadn't been built in the first place, because this has been a problem for me for my whole time as a town councillor. I even had another councillor the other day saying, well, when are you sorting this site out? This is why I wanted to bring it to you today rather than just to leave it to the officers to reject it and for it to go to the planning inspectorate. I wanted you to consider the social value of this as well as the planning aspects of it. And I think the planning balance does allow you to offset the less than substantial harm with the benefits to be had that I've raised. And I certainly would hope that if you are considering rejecting this particular application, that, as Councillor Fagan says, you defer it until you at least have had a site visit, because I think that might open some of your eyes to the problems we are facing here. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stark. Right, we have a motion on the table from Councillor Bowen, seconded by Councillor Swinglehurst, for refusal of this application. Can you all confirm that you are all eligible to vote, that you've all been present? And can I ask Democratic Services, Mrs. Priest, the number of members that are able to vote on this, eligible to vote on this application, and that the poll is ready to launch?
Yes, Chairman, we have 15 voting members and they may vote now.
Okay, thank you. So the application is for refusal as recommended by the planning officer, for refusal, against, or abstain, please. Can you all make sure that you press your buttons and sent your vote into Democratic Services? How many are we waiting on?
Just waiting on one, Chairman. The result does look unanimous if you wish me to announce what I have.
Okay, carry on, please.
Okie dokie. So the last one has just come in. So all 15 have voted and the results are 11 for, 3 against and 1 abstention.
So can you repeat that, please? So
yep, so that was 11 for,
yes,
3 against,
okay,
and 1 abstain.
Okay, fine. 15. Fine. So that application, I can confirm, has been refused as recommended by the planning officer. So thank you for that. The intention is that we have a 10-minute comfort break now. Right, we're now live, so thank you. Can I ask that public speaker for item 8 on the agenda, attending as a virtual attendee, Mr. Lively, the applicant, is admitted to the meeting, please. Good morning, Mr. Lively. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear Mr. Lively? Obviously not. Mr. Lively, are you in a position to respond? No. I think he's got problems at the moment.
IT support, I think, Chairman.
Looks like it.
Yeah, Chairman, it looks like Mr. Lively's got no audio connected to his system. Would you like to just postpone the meeting again shortly while we get Mr. Lively in the meeting?
Okay. When you say postponed, you mean?
Pause the live stream.
Just put, if we can pause the live.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you a lot better now, Mr. Lively. If you mute your microphone now while the presentation goes on, and then unmute yourself when I request you to speak. Thank you. Right, we're back live again now. So application, the third application in front of us this morning is item 8, land at Hillview, Dinder, 201220. This is for an outline permission for the demolition of an existing dwelling, the erection of up to 3 residential dwellings with associated drive and access alterations. And as I said, this is an outline application. We have 2 speakers on this application this morning. Dinder Parish Council that have made a written submission, and also we have Mr. Lively, who is the applicant, who is with us to speak. The planning officer for this application is Gemma Webster, and the local ward councillor is Councillor Summers. Councillor Summers is not a member of this committee, will not get a vote, but has the opportunity to open and close the debate. So without further ado, if I can ask Mrs. Webster to make the presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to refer members to the update sheet, which shows that the climate change compliance checklist and the biodiversity checklist have been completed and submitted by the agent. The agent has stated that climate change measures will be incorporated into the design at the reserve matters stage. This application is an outline proposal for up to 3 dwellings with associated drive and access alterations, and all other matters are reserved. The site is located at the eastern edge of Dindor village and is approximately 1.2 kilometres from Rotherham Industrial Estate, to the southeast of Hollow Farm Road on a site known as Hillview. Can I have the next slide, please? The site is indicated by the red star, and as can be seen from the aerial photograph, bordering the site to the east are residential properties in a linear form fronting the highway, with agricultural land to the north and south. Currently, there is agricultural land to the east. However, there has been recent permission for up to 8 dwellings on this land. The site is within the Dindor neighbourhood area, which was designated on the 12th of August 2013. The neighbourhood development plan was submitted for examination on 8th of October 2020. However, the examiner's report has not yet been received. Therefore, at this stage, moderate weight can be afforded to the plan. Dindor is identified within the core strategy as a smaller settlement where proportionate housing will be appropriate. Can I have the next slide, please? The site is currently comprised of a detached chalet bungalow that is vacant and its garden curtilage, which would be demolished as part of the scheme. The site is flat with mature hedgerows for each of the boundaries. The pictures show the existing bungalow looking southeast from the access in the top photograph. The middle right picture is the grounds looking towards the east, and the bottom photograph shows the bungalow from the eastern boundary looking southwest. Can I have the next slide, please? The existing block plan shows the context of the bungalow set back from the line of existing development, with the majority of the grounds to the front of the property. In addition, there is a detached garage and a number of outbuildings on the site that will also be removed as part of the scheme. Access to the site is via the existing driveway in the northeast corner of the site. Could I have the next slide, please? From the amended indicative site layout plan submitted with the application, it is proposed that 3 detached dwellings would occupy the site in a linear format fronting the roadside to maintain the existing character of this part of the settlement, with sufficient parking for each dwelling in front of the properties and a fairly substantial south-facing rear gardens. The siting, layout, design and landscaping of the scheme is to be determined at the reserve matter stage. However, there is ample opportunity to provide tree planting and maintain the boundary hedgerows to ensure the site maintains the rural setting. The original plans were for 4 dwellings. It is considered that reduction in dwelling numbers has enabled better spatial use of the site, which has improved containment and minimised the impact on both streetscape and landscape aspects. There is no conservation area designation with Dindor, but there are a number of designated and undesignated heritage assets within the locality. The Grade 2 listed Church of St Andrew and the Grade 2 listed Glebe Farmhouse and the Grade 2 listed Roadside Barn are all worthy of note as designated assets, and the land to the south of the church is also the site of a former medieval village, which is a scheduled ancient monument. All 4 heritage assets are situated within 300 metres to the southwest of the proposed site, and the character of the settlement forms part of their setting. The Historic Buildings Officer had concerns of the original layout and its impact upon the streetscape. However, following the amended indicative layout and reduction in the numbers, he has stated that the architectural and material character would be considered appropriate in this context, and a good balance between residential and agricultural scale and form. And thus it is considered that the proposed development will not harm the setting of the heritage assets. Drainage of foul water is proposed to be disposed of via private package treatment plants for each dwelling, with the outfall utilised a shared managed soakaway field. The surface water will be managed through site soakaway infiltration systems. These methods align with the aims of the core strategy policies SD3 and SD4. Some concerns were raised in regards to the original plans from the residents, such as the proposal not being in keeping with the existing linear development. However, following amended plans, no further letters of objection were received. Next slide, please. Access to the site is via the existing access driveway in the northeast corner of the site. The site will be able to provide sufficient visibility space, parking and turning area. There are no objections from the highways engineer in relation to the access. Next slide, please. The junction of the B4399, the Rotherham to Home Lacey Road, and the U72009, the Dindor Road, some 420 metres from the site, has been raised as a concern from the Parish Council. And although it is acknowledged that the visibility is restricted at the junction, there are no officially recorded accidents at the junction, and the junction has not been included in the county-wide accident cluster list. Therefore, it is not considered that the application will cause significant additional traffic that would amount to severe impact level. This is supported by the no objection from the area engineer team leader. The photographs show the visibility space from the current existing access. Next slide, please. As was stated earlier, the land to the west has recently received planning approval for up to 8 dwellings across 2 sites that sit between this site and Dindor Hall. The photograph shows the adjacent site looking from the Garden of Hillview towards the southwest. Next slide, please. These applications were both in outline form. However, the indicative layout plans demonstrated that the pattern of development would be linear to follow the character of the area. As can be seen in this copy of the indicative plan for the 6 dwellings, the proposed layout of this application would align with these approvals and also follow the existing development line of the residential properties to the east. It should also be noted that outline permission for 5 dwellings have been approved with a current reserve matters application for the site to the northeast at the Oaks. Again, the site layout is set out as linear development. This proposal for the Hillview site would sit adjacent to the 2 approvals to the west and the approval to the northeast, with existing residential properties further beyond to the east, and thus it would not be considered to be a freestanding site. To conclude, the site is considered to be directly adjacent to the main built-up area of Dindor, and indeed it is adjacent to the proposed settlement boundary within the NDP. The site is already used for residential use, and this proposal offers an opportunity to better utilise the land. The removal of the existing bungalow, which does not offer any architectural merit, and its replacement with carefully designed dwellings, designed to be agreed at the reserve matters stage, with associated landscaping, would be a betterment for the area. There have been no technical objections to the scheme. Therefore, the proposal is in accordance with the NPPF, the core strategy, and the emerging NDP, and it is officer recommendation that this application is approved subject to the recommended conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair. That brings me to the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Webster. Now I move across to our public speaker this morning, Mr. Lively, the applicant. You have 3 minutes in your own time, Mr. Lively. Hopefully,
excuse me, Chairman. Did you want the Parish Council comment first? Yeah.
My apologies. Yes, Parish Council comment first. So Mr. Brown will read the Parish Council submission out, and then I will call upon Mr. Lively. Thank you.
Okay. Dynedor Parish Council welcomes the opportunity to reiterate comments we've made regarding development at this location within Dynedor Village. Specifically, we would wish to highlight this application is separate from but adjacent to 3 other applications for multiple dwellings on existing single dwelling sites along Hollow Farm Road, which is the main access road into the village. The total new dwellings on this, if granted, and adjacent sites would amount to some 16 dwellings on a single track road with little in the way of passing spaces and would, in our opinion, result in overdevelopment within the area. The proposed development is on a very narrow single track road leading from the B4399 Home Lacey Road into the village. Visibility on exiting the village at the B4399 is poor, and the increased traffic generated by this and nearby developments will exacerbate an existing issue with the junction that should be addressed before any further development within the village is permitted. Similarly, there is a very sharp bend in the single track access road between the junction with the B4399 and the proposed development. We feel strongly that the additional traffic generated by the proposed developments represents an unacceptable increase, leading to greatly reduced safety for vehicle and pedestrian traffic. We would wish to highlight that there is no public transport accessing the village site and that Dynedor has little in the way of facilities. Residents have no option but to travel outside the village for shops, medical services, schools, and most social activities. We have one village hall. We would expect the total of the proposed developments to increase the number of vehicles using this road by at least 35 vehicles, with the potential for upwards of 200 plus vehicle movements per day. Drainage along the road is extremely poor and the road floods when it rains. There is considerable damage to the road surface as a result of recent flooding. The road is considered not fit for purpose. We are concerned that runoff water from the proposed developments will increase the amount of water entering the road, increasing the potential for flooding. We are further concerned that the intensity of the combined developments will create difficulty in providing suitable soakaways for the sites, themselves exacerbating the existing problems. The village has no mains drainage or sewerage system. The proposed development will need an adequate system to deal with sewage and surface drainage for each of the dwellings with adequate provision for soakaways within the property. Currently, drainage issues result in septic tank backups when the road floods, leading to sewerage flooding at the lowest point of the village hall. These issues must be resolved before any further development is permitted. The village consists of single dwellings in a linear form along the roadways, generally within large plots. Whilst we welcome the reduction of the proposed number of houses on the site, the proposed development is not in keeping with the overall design and visual amenity of the village, and is not in keeping with our neighbourhood development plan, which has now passed the independent external examination stage and awaits referendum. The development is outside of the development area within our neighbourhood development plan. The application is contrary to the views expressed during extensive consultation with residents under the neighbourhood plan process. And that concludes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Now it's your turn, Mr. Lively. Hopefully we've got some good sound. So you'll see that Mrs. Priest, the Democratic Service Officer, will hold a timer up to give you an indication. We're pretty strict on the 3-minute rule. So in your own time, Mr. Lively, thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'd just like to bring a few points up about water from the site. The site actually, if you stand on the road and look at it, it actually runs from the road past the bungalow out into the field beyond. It wouldn't run because natural perforation would obviously be in. So no water from our site goes on the highway. I was there yesterday and with the ditch, I went and just put my foot in and dragged about a bit, and there's no water in the ditch after quite a lot of rain in February. So I don't see where that comes from. When it does rain and we do get water in the ditch, it will run right, will go down towards the White House, not down towards the village hall. I had a lot of work to do with the village hall to build it and get up and going. I've been in Dynedor for 40 years. And I think this will be a good opportunity to the village to get young families back in there. Nobody in Dynedor is getting any younger. We need young people. We got a situation where we took over the Dynedor Youth Camp and we got a working party on a Sunday goes up there, and they're all well over 70. We need young people in the village to regenerate it. We've got the church is not being well supported. We haven't even got a vicar. Now that the WI has left Dinder Village Hall because that wasn't supported enough, we get bowls night on the Monday where we need 16 people. 6-7 of those come from Hereford because the older people don't want to come out on a winter's night, which when we play bowls. We need young family back into Dinder to regenerate it. Otherwise, the village will go downhill. And if we get new houses there, it'll make it look good. It'll encourage people. So really, that's all I've got to say. The traffic part of it, I've been there for 40 years. I was a milkman there 50 years ago. I never have known near misses. So I don't know what some people are talking about. But as far as I'm concerned, that will be an asset to Dinder. Bring people in, get people into the church, the village hall, and get it up and running again. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lively. I'd now like to request that Mr. Lively leave the meeting. I'll remind him that he can watch the live stream on the YouTube channel of the council. Thank you, Mr. Lively, and good day to you. Right, we now move across to Ward Member, Councillor Summers. He has the right to speak first and then closes the debate, but will not get a vote. So in your own time, Councillor Summers, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay.
Thank you, yes.
Before I start with the whole thing, there's been a couple of mentions about previous applications being passed. I must reiterate at this present time that I have 3 emails dated 26th of the 5th, 21st of the 9th, and 19th of the 11th, where I've stated that I will not support any more buildings in Dinder until the infrastructure is brought up to spec and will support it. So none of those applications were passed with my approval. I disapproved all of them. So I'll start now with, I have concerns about the lack of site visit to Dinder Village ahead of this planning meeting. And while I appreciate we are in lockdown, I felt that it was imperative that this site and the road in particular, by the way, going through the village is be seen by committee members. We had ongoing issues with flooding. A small rain and the road floods, covers the what's left of the ditches, and you can't tell where they are. The proposed development is on a very narrow single track road leading from the B4399. As most people will know, that's a very busy road. It runs into Rotherwest and carries a lot of traffic. It provides the main access in and out of the village, and concern has been expressed on many occasions regarding the visibility when exiting the village. As can be seen by the very well documented concerns of the parish council, there is the potential of upward of 16 homes being built on a road that, in my opinion and others, is not fit for purpose. We can't even get a bus through. This is not about meeting housing targets. This is about public safety on a single track with few, if any, passing points. It is about a blind junction on a very busy road. It is about farmers having to pull vehicles out of ditches because when it rains, it's difficult to tell where the edge of the road is. Drainage along the road is poor, and when it rains, the road floods. Over the years, there have been many attempts to sort out the drainage problems, often at the expense of the parish council. In fact, they just invested £2,000 of money. If you were to ask the residents presently living next to this site, they would suggest that the problem of water rushing past their property be sorted before sharing the problem with new residents. I am also troubled that neither the concerns of the parish council or myself have, in my opinion, been suitably addressed, and that's why I mentioned that I've refused to sign off on any of these planning applications. So they've all been strictly the planning department, and both myself and the parish council have refused to sign off on them. To summarize, apart from the concerns over surface water flooding on the road, all told, this could lead to 14 to 16 new properties on a narrow road with few passing places except for private drives, which impacts on local residents. There are no local amenities or transport links to the village. Impact upon traffic on this road will be substantially increased to 200 plus per day. Limited visibility from the road onto the B4399. It is contrary to the views expressed during extensive consultation with residents under the neighborhood plan process. The proposed element is outside of the development area identified within the draft of the neighborhood development plan. In my opinion, until the committee has seen the situation for themselves, it will be difficult to make a decision. I therefore urgently request a deferment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Summers. Right, we go into the debate proper now. We have Councillor Paul Andrews to start, Councillor Fagan, Foxton and Stone in that order. So Councillor Paul Andrews, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Summers and all on the report. I'd like to echo what Councillor Summers has said about deferring this so we could all go and see as committee members the actual area. So that is what I'm proposing. I'm not going to go any further than that. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Andrews. Have I a seconder for that proposal?
I'll second, Chairman.
Councillor Selden. Right. Well, it is my intention then to actually stop the debate at that point. I see no point in us debating this if the actual committee decides to actually defer. So I think if Democratic Services can actually qualify how many members are entitled to vote and whether the actual voting system is ready to launch. Thank you.
Yes, Chairman, we've got 14 voting members.
Okay.
And they may vote now.
We have a proposal on the table then for deferment of this application for a site visit. So as soon as that comes on the screen, so it's for deferment, against or abstain. So if you would like to vote now, please, and press the submit button. Thank you.
All votes are in, Chairman. 12 for and 2 against.
Okay, so thank you for that. So that application is deferred for a site visit. So without further ado, I'll move on to the next application. Thank you, Councillor Summers, and we await a site visit. So fourth application in front of us today is application 204274, land adjoining Duke Street, Withington. We have one speaker attending as a virtual attendee, Mr. Smith. So if I could ask that he is admitted to the meeting, please. All right, good morning, Mr. Smith. Could you confirm that you can hear and see? Mr. Smith, can you confirm that you can, you're muted at the moment.
Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. We can hear you. Thank you very much. So this application, land adjoining Duke Street, Withington, planning officer dealing with this is Alistair Wager, and the local ward member for this application is Councillor Paul Andrews, who is a member of this committee, but he stands aside as the ward councillor with the privilege of opening and closing the debate, but will not have a vote on this application. So without further ado, I'll ask Mr. Wager to make the presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This presentation relates to land at Duke Street, Withington, and is for the proposed improvements to existing field access and construction of an agricultural track. The application site is indicated with a star on the map shown. The development plan for the area is formed of both the Herefordshire Local Plan Core Strategy and the Withington Group Neighbourhood Development Plan. The National Planning Policy Framework is also a significant material consideration. Next slide, please. This slide shows an aerial image of the site and its context. The application site is accessed off the classified public highway on the outside of a bend. The linear form of dwellings which constitutes Duke Street may be seen to the left of the slide, with a village school being found in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. Further, Stonehouse Farm may be seen in the top right corner. The image is annotated with the application site edged in red at the centre of the slide, a public right-of-way being denoted as a dashed pink line. The local green space is identified in the NDP being hatched in green and labelled, further with the Withington Conservation Area being denoted in light blue and covers much of the right-hand portion of the slide, including the application site. Next slide, please. This slide includes two site photos looking at the existing access and gate. The bottom right photo shows a wider view looking across the public highway to the northeast, showing the existing field gate and the adjacent residential dwelling. The top left photo shows a close-up photo of the existing gate with a stile to the right and the agricultural field below, which forms part of the conservation area as previously referenced. Next slide, please. This slide includes two site photos looking from the agricultural field towards the existing field gate. The top left photo shows a view looking west towards Duke Street, with the gate being in the left-hand side of the image. The bottom right photo shows a view looking broadly southwest, with the field gate being shown to the right of the image. The ruts in the field show the rough line of the proposed track for reference. Next slide, please. This slide shows a plan view of the existing access arrangements on the site, with the existing 3.6 metre wide field gate being denoted. Members may note the hatched area at the top of the slide showing the agricultural tract that has previously been approved by the local planning authority under permitted development rights, as referenced at paragraph 3.1 of the officer report. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed arrangements for the agricultural track. As may be seen, the existing gate will be repositioned 10 metres back from the carriageway edge, and an agricultural tract formed for approximately 30 metres to connect to the existing approval for an agricultural track, which leads to Stonehouse Farm. The existing stile will remain in place, with a visibility display of 50 metres being maintained in either direction from the existing access, and with the first portion of the track being made up of a bound material. The Council's highways engineer has reviewed the proposal and concludes that there will be no harm in highways terms arising from the proposed development, as is set out at paragraph 6.6 of the officer report. The application site is noted to lie within the Withington Conservation Area. The Council has a statutory duty under Section 72 of the Planning Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act 1990 to pay special attention to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of the area, with case law confirming that change per se isn't unacceptable, with development which leaves the character or appearance unharmed meeting this statutory test. This is reflected in the development plan policies for the area, including policy LD4 of the core strategy and policy P7 of the NDP. Officers do not consider that the proposal to give rise to harm from a heritage standpoint, as the character of the area would remain unchanged due to the continuance of the agricultural use. And whilst there is an element of change to the appearance of the area, this is not considered to be harmful in this instance. Penultimately, the site is identified as a local green space in the Withington Neighbourhood Development Plan, with policy P5 seeking to protect areas from development which would detract from the character, appearance and function of the locale. Officers consider the proposal to preserve these aspects of the local green space in this instance. To conclude, the development plan carries a statutory presumption in its favour, and the proposal is considered to accord with the policies of the development plan, and officers recommend the application for approval accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wager. We have three speakers on this application today. Withington Group Parish Council that have submitted a video. Mr. Bainbridge, who is an objector, who has submitted a written representation, and Mrs. Smith, who has joined us today. Now, Democratic Services will start the recording of the playing of the video from the Parish Council. But I just make members aware that there are subtitles to the start of the actual video rather than sound. So if you think that you're not getting any sound through, it's because there isn't any on the start of the video. So I just make members aware of that. So if we could have the video played, please. Thank you.
Technology is not with us today, Chairman. I'll just try and load it again. Bear with me.
It's unusual for you, Mrs. Priest. You're normally very good with this technology.
May the force be with you.
Oh, it's more like Gremlins, Chairman.
Right. I presume that's it, Mrs. Priest. Yeah. Okay.
Chairman, I do have a submission I could just read to amplify that if you wish. It's very short if you wished.
Yeah, I think that would be very useful. Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
It is a pity that you are now hearing this statement, as the video will give you an idea of the road and dangerous corner this application is sat on. The Parish Council would like to object to the application on the following grounds. The increased use of the field access would endanger vehicular and pedestrian safety on this residential section of Duke Street at a sharp bend where there is no pavement and the pedestrian entrance to Withington Primary School is just to the south. Please see initial highways objection to application for Holiday House 190884, which used the same access point. The access would utilise an existing field gate. However, forward visibility around the bend for vehicles travelling from the south and turning right into the access is very poor, and the proposed holiday cottage would result in an intensification of use of the access. Plans demonstrating the forward visibility around the bend should be provided, utilising only land that is either within the control of the applicant or public highway. It goes on to say, as you've not been able to see the video, please visit to see how dangerous it would be turning into the gateway in any type of vehicle. We fully support the position of the ward councillor in pushing for this application to be deferred, and that concludes, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. We now have a submission from Mr. Bainbridge, an objector. So if Mr. Brown could read that out, please.
Yeah, before I start, Chairman, I think I should make clear that this document was sent directly to members of the committee and is replicated within the committee update, but it is our procedure to read it nonetheless. So, the officer's report states at paragraph 6.12 that the function of the access would remain unchanged. This is not correct, as the applicant clearly states that it is a new replacement farm access to replace those on Lock Road. As a main access to what could become a major farm operation, a full traffic impact assessment is required. The highway engineer has previously stated that the forward visibility around the bend for vehicles travelling from the south and turning right into the access is very poor. Application 190884. He recommended that without changes to the junction involving highway widening, the application should be refused. The application description of this new farm access, as proposed by the applicant in the supporting documents, is unclear. The existing access only serves the field, which also has another access onto Lock Road. In 2019, in the applicant's submission for an earlier appeal, reference application number 190880, an aerial photograph showed no track. The current muddy track was only created on Tuesday, 19 January 2021. It is unclear as to why earlier photographs are not included in the officer's report. There was a previous request as to whether prior approval for a farm track was required, application 190793. This track has not been implemented. Therefore, any access linking up to the farm buildings should be included in the application, as the whole route will connect to the highway. Finally, the report fails to refer to the proposed traffic calming measures being prepared by Balfour Beatty for the Herefordshire Council. These include improved pedestrian safety measures just 40 metres to the south of the bend at the main pedestrian access to Withington School. Pedestrian safety will be at greater risk with this change from field to farm access onto a blind bend of a narrow road with no pavements. Contrary to the applicant's statement in the supporting document, Duke Street is residential on a bus route with more vehicle, cycle and pedestrian usage than Lock Road. All of the above points have been made to the planning officer, but no responses have been received or included in the committee report. The residents of Duke Street, supported by many of the objectors, respectfully request that the application be refused on highway safety grounds, or at the very least be deferred for a site visit by members. This submission is for on behalf of some 15 named residents from Duke Street. And that concludes, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Brown. We now move across to Mr. Smith. In your own time, Mr. Smith, you have 3 minutes to make your case. Thank you. You're muted, Mr. Smith.
Hope you can hear me again, sir.
We can now, thank you.
Right. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Paul Smith and I speak in support of this application, and many thanks to Mr. Brown to help me attend this committee. I'd like to concentrate on the objections raised. All objections relate to the highway issues. To explain, the level of use of this existing gateway does not require planning permission. The sole objective of this proposal is to manage in a safer way the use of the existing field gateway. It would manage existing farm traffic originating from the north of the village and not traffic from any other direction, including the south. It would entail more hard standing to prevent mud being deposited on the road, and a deeper gateway to enable vehicles to wait off-road whilst they're opening or closing the gates. These features have been accepted by the Highways Officer. Therefore, I contend that the proposal would improve local conditions and the operation of this gateway and not worsen them. And accordingly, this would accord with the wishes of local residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Can I now request that Mr. Smith leave the meeting? I'd like to remind him that he can watch the live stream of the meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. But thank you very much for your input, Mr. Smith, and good day to you. Right, we now move across to Councillor Paul Andrews, who is a local ward member for this item. As previously stated, he is a member of this committee, but stands aside in his capacity as ward councillor for this application, and therefore gets the opportunity to open and close the debate, but does not have a vote. So in your own time, please, Councillor Andrews. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee members and officers, for letting me actually speak today. Regarding this, I do wish that we could actually defer this item for a site visit. I did do an email to officers to try and get this done before the meeting, and unfortunately it was not allowed. And it was for you members to actually make the decision. So as you've just heard in the submissions from the parish council and also a parish member, Duke Street is not, is a residential area. There is a lot more to this entrance than meets the eye on visibility, also drainage issues if a track was actually put in. There is flooding issues in Duke Street and a track coming up, which obviously, like was mentioned in the report from Mr. Bainbridge, was only just put in recently. If you had photographs beforehand, there was no tracks whatsoever. So I do urge committee members that you defer this item so we can go and have a proper site visit. If you'd like to do that, I appreciate it. At the moment, I would let you carry on the debate, but and then I'll come back and see what happens at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Andrews. We go into the debate proper now then, and I look for the first speaker. None showing currently. Councillor Fagan.
Councillor Fagan.
Councillor Fagan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to recommend a deferral so that we can actually go for a site visit, please.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that proposal for a deferment? Councillor Foxton?
I would second that.
Right, I had Councillor Foxton's hand up. Was that
right.
for
Yes,
second?
it was. Yes, and I second that proposal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we've got a situation exactly the same as the previous application, where the motion to defer and a seconder as well. So it is my intention, rather than go into debate at this time, that we go straight to the vote. And so if I can confirm how many members are eligible to vote, and is the voting system ready to launch?
Yes, Chairman, there'll be 13 voting members on this poll, and they may vote now.
Right, thank you. So the proposal is to defer this for a site visit. So if you could all vote now, please, for a for deferral, against, or abstain.
Chair, my submit button isn't working.
Right.
I think we've got a malfunction, Chairman.
Right. Can we relaunch the actual vote then?
Yes, Chairman, I'll just do that now for you.
Chair? Right, you should see it on your screens again. Again, proposal is for deferment. For, against, or abstain, please.
All votes are in, Chairman. We have 10 for, 2 against, and 1 abstain.
Okay, so again, that application, the vote is for deferment of that, ready for a site visit. So that does conclude our business for today. Our next meeting is on Wednesday, the 17th of March, where we're hopefully able to have site visits prior to that meeting. And there's a good chance that the previous application and this one will be forward on that agenda. Can I
Chairman,
ask?
Chairman, as
Sorry.
it's St Patrick's Day, can I suggest there will be an emerald green theme to the 17th of March?
Well, that's in the request of the members. So can I ask that the live stream is